As my husband and I enter the marble courtyard of the bride's father in Cana, the voices inside me began their familiar assault. You're crazy. Keep quiet. Don't embarrass Jedediah. I shook my head like always, trying to free myself from their torment. Nothing helped. I bent low so my gold scarf would cover my face as I stooped to wash in the jars at the entrance, hoping no one would notice me. That was the first time I saw him. A man a few years younger than I, with hair the color of pine bark, was bending down at the washing jar in front of me. Bringing his hands up from the water, he turned to look at me. I'd never seen eyes like that in a man. I felt like I didn't need to breathe. I had perfect, instantaneous peace. What had happened? I had no pain or fear. Who was this man that had baptized me with his eyes? Just then, the bridegroom Yosef walked over and greeted him. "Rabbi," he said, thumping him on the shoulder. They both laughed and embraced together. Then Yosef positioned us squarely in front of the eyes. Jedediah and Mary of Magdala, my cousin, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus laid his hand on my husband's shoulder. As he dropped his chestnut eyes to me, I found myself focusing this time on his mouth as he spoke one simple phrase. "Peace to you, Mary of Magdala." Peace. Just like that, the noises in my head gone. I had never not heard them. I suddenly felt vacant. I couldn't respond. Was I having another spell? I tried to speak, but the words were... All I knew was the anxiety, that awful constant shuddering in my arms and legs had quieted. The tightness in my stomach that always came whenever I was in a group of people had fallen away, like a giant hand that had relaxed its grip. I was overtaken by... What was it? I wanted to linger there, to soak it all in. But I heard Jedediah clear his throat. "Rabbi, my wife." He made a gesture indicating my instability. I pretended not to notice. Just then, an older woman excused herself for interrupting as she pulled Jesus aside, saying something about not having enough wine. Jedediah gripped my arm and led me to the table farthest from the bride and groom as he scolded me. "You should have said something, you demented imbecile. Are you mute too?" He glared at me with fury in his eyes. I always saw whenever I disappointed him. I felt like I was about to convulse as the voices screamed and barked, all of them writhing around in my mind like a pit of serpents. "Don't think about that man. He's just like all the rest. He wouldn't like you anyway, you worthless, childless slut." Jedediah snapped at me under his breath. "Mary, sit down before you cost me anything further. We are already 3 days late because of you." I dutifully plopped down. For a split second, I felt some degree of pity for Jedediah, having to navigate a crazy wife through a group of strangers and look happy about it, so he can maintain a business relationship with the groom. I closed my eyes to try and capture that peace that had invaded me just the moment before, desperately searching for that whiff of freedom that had blown into my bruised and exhausted brain. Was it still there? I held my head to stop the spinning when my husband jerked my arm down. "Cover yourself, woman!" He yanked on my cloak to hide the bloodied scars that were still healing on my inner forearm. Appearances. Yes. I had forgotten. I quickly positioned the brass bangles on my arms to cover my secret. I took a deep breath to try and regain my composure. Closing my eyes, I could smell the lamb that was being served. I had no appetite, other than for that strange peace that had so satisfied me a moment before. Oh, to God that I would feast on that! But just like always, those shrieking, frigid thoughts took control. Protect yourself. Men are swine. Stay away. I secretly wished I had my favorite stone just then. How I needed to bleed this pain. I opened my eyes, trying to steady myself, and again saw that face. Without warning, I suddenly, intensely hated that Jesus. My repulsion toward him spread like pollen on a spring breeze. I was allergic to him. Oddly, he looked at me right then from across the room. His face was tender and tranquil. I pried myself away from his glance, trembling, feeling a snarl forming on my lips as the thought snaked through my mind. Rabbis, you've had enough of them. I gulped down some melon water to try and quiet my inner war, when suddenly I was hypnotized by a memory of myself as a girl of 13. My father, the head of the Jewish Center for Learning in Magdalene, had come home early from work one day. Always alone, I was delirious with joy at his return, and put my meal preparation down to embrace him, which he ignored. I told him that in my imagination that day, I had created a dance to express my worship to God. Would he like to see it? Father had sat down in his chair and looked in my direction. While he didn't answer, it was enough of an entrance for me to share with him my treasure. I closed my eyes and began to hum a melody I had written, a heart song that sang the thrill of my worship. I began to move, lifting my head and down and up and down, and felt my long hair tickle my back. I jumped long, flung wide my arms, leapt high and proud, leading with my newly formed breast. I was dancing. My whole body was so alive. I opened my eyes, checking to see if Father was watching, and to my surprise, his face was fixed on me. For the first time I could ever remember, I had his full attention. He looked captivated. Yes, that's the word. My heart was soaring. I thought I noticed the slight smile part his lips, which only made me dance higher and better, twirling in circles in my linen tunic, loving how my long, dark hair was falling at new and interesting angles. I closed my eyes, never having known such joy and approval, abandoned in my first expression of such love for God and for Father, until a violent, swift hand streaked across my face, whacking me to the wall. I could feel the heat of the welt already forming as Father pulled my shoulders, bringing his face next to mine, his eyes wide, wild with a look I'd never seen. His breath was quaking. His hazel eyes bulged with a look that sickened me with something I couldn't define. He pulled me close to him and held me from behind so tight I thought I would faint. A rush of nausea overwhelmed me as his body stiffened, his hands reaching, until suddenly, without warning, he yelled out and threw me to the ground. I laid on the floor frozen. He turned his back toward me. I stared up at him, holding my face, watching the tassels on his prayer shawl collide into each other. Father, what did I do? He reeled around on the heel of his shoe and raised his finger at me with an accusation I didn't even understand. You have defiled this house with your vile seductions, Mary of Magdala. You are an odor in the nostrils of God. I am a rabbi. I will not tolerate this kind of wickedness under my own roof. How dare you assault Jehovah's priests with your flirtations? You are banished from here, you motherless infidel. No wonder your mother preferred death over raising you. Within 3 weeks, I was betrothed and married to Jedediah. On the afternoon of our wedding, I looked over to Father. When he saw my hunger to speak with him, he pursed his lips and turned his head in the opposite direction. There was no hint of affection, no hope for reconciliation. From that point on, I made a promise to myself, never to trust another man again. The minstrels from Yosef's wedding began their singing, rousing me from my dark thoughts. I took a bite of goat cheese as I watched the bride and groom, their eyes fixed on each other, smiling with an unseen force that was stronger than their lips. Yosef rose to toast his new wife, quoting an ancient poem from the wedding of King Solomon. You have stolen my heart, my bride. You have stolen my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How delightful is your love! How much more pleasing is your love than wine! The bride rose to her feet and raised her cup to her bridegroom. From the ancient poem of King Solomon on his wedding day, she said, like an apple tree among the trees of the forest is my lover among the young men. I delight to sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my taste. He has taken me to the banquet hall, and his banner over me is love. Suddenly, something shifted. The atmosphere changed. A presence filled the room. No one moved or spoke, but all eyes were strangely fixed on the eyes. Then I felt it again. Unexpected, unexplained, unsurpassed peace. Suddenly those eyes turned to look at me. No, into me. And they were glistening with joy. In that instant, the voices rose in their most vicious siege yet, accusing, lacerating, battering me with their violent, insulting threats. But with his eyes on me, I had hope. I made a decision. I wanted more peace, more freedom. I wanted more.